Good afternoon and welcome back to Football League World TV. We've got a debate show for you this afternoon where we're going to be discussing the three best deals from across the EFL so far this January transfer window. I've got Billy and Toby joining me this afternoon. Billy, how are you getting on?
Yeah, doing very well, thank you. Looking forward to having my picks and hearing Toby's as well. There's some good business in the EFL so far, so yeah, looking forward to getting into it.
Absolutely, plenty to get stuck into. Toby, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. As Billy says, transfer windows are always exciting times for football fans with the deals coming in and going out. So going to be interesting to get really stuck into a few of those over the next half hour or so.
Absolutely. We're streaming across Facebook, YouTube and Twitter this afternoon. So if you're joining us and you feel that your club's done the best bit of business in the EFL so far this transfer window, get yourselves in the comments. This is the debate show. We want to hear from you. Right, we're going to get stuck straight into our picks though. So we're going to start with the transfer that you could both agree on, that you felt that this was in the top three, and that's Dillon McCandy joining Blackburn Rovers earlier today on a permanent transfer from Tottenham. He signed a 3.5-year deal at Ewood Park with a fee quoted to have been around £500,000. So it looks really, really good, this bit of business. Billy, I will come to you first because I think Toby's going to completely steal the show, given that this is a Blackburn transfer. So why is McCandy in your top three, Billy?
Personally, just looking at the deal first and foremost, and I was expecting a loan to Championship, given sort of the talent he has got, his numbers within the Tottenham Academy, how he's viewed by Tottenham fans as well. I think that they see a special player in him. And the fact that he's been allowed to leave on a permanent deal, I think that can only be of benefit to Blackburn here. I watched him at Stevenage at the start of the season, at Stevenage versus Tottenham under-21s, and he's a player I wrote down in my notes thinking, you know what, this could be a good Luton signing if I keep it quiet and there's no sort of hype around him, but unfortunately not. But yeah, he stood out on the evening. He's technically very, very gifted. He's one of those players that always can make an extra bit of space for himself. He has the end product as seen with his numbers within Tottenham's under-21s this season, and it's an all-round brilliant signing in my eyes. Blackburn as well. I think Toby will come onto it more in terms of stylistically and how else he can fit in, but the sort of free-flowing attacking football that they do play, the exciting players they do have, I think he's going to fit in very, very well. And as you say, the really small fee, it seems, for a player that has a lot of scope to improve and become a really, really good player.
I mean, Toby, let's just touch with you here, being a Blackburn fan. What was your reaction to this transfer going through earlier today?
Well, one of excitement, really. I mean, I think what stood out for me to begin with was if fans of a club such as Tottenham are in such uproar about the player being sold, then you know he's got something about him. And so the reaction of Spurs fans to this deal has been pretty much unanimous in the sense of, what on earth are we doing here? Why have we done this? So that in itself just makes this look like a really, really good signing for Blackburn. But beyond that, I think it was always going to be important to bring in some attacking reinforcements in this window. Obviously, Rovers have done really well from an attacking sense, thanks in no small part to Ben Brereton Diaz during the first half of this season. But having not actually brought in a striker to replace Adam Armstrong during the summer, and then losing another sort of attacking outlet in Ian Pervada to injury back in November, sort of bringing in the attacking reinforcements was always going to be a sort of key bit of business for Rovers in this window. So in that sense already, it's a good signing. And then to get it on a permanent as well, it just is like a cherry on top almost for Rovers. I mean, there are not many players in Markande's position of being a young, promising Premier League attacker. He would be able to get on a permanent deal in January as opposed to on a loan deal. I mean, even Rovers will attest to that themselves in terms of, the likes of Harvey Elliott and even Reda Kadra this season. Markande is the sort of player that you would target for a loan, and that his parent club, i.e. Tottenham, would single out as we loan him out this season for development for us in the future. So for Rovers to sort of get on top of the situation that Markande found himself in at Spurs in terms of turning down the contracts, as has been reported, and sort of taken advantage of that from a Rovers perspective. That's really sort of all credit to those people in charge of the transfer business there, being alert, being ready to respond to that sort of that twist in the scenario and take advantage of it in terms of getting McCandy as a long-term player. And I think as well, obviously, we've talked about his ability already and what he will bring to this side on the pitch with what he can do with the ball at his feet. But I think the other thing that sort of stands out for me is the ambition that he's shown here. There's a lot of players who might have been quite happy to take the contract at Tottenham, which, if we're being honest, is probably going to have been more lucrative than the deal he will be on at Blackburn, certainly from a long-term perspective when you consider the financial power there is at Spurs. So, that sort of shows just how much he wants to go out and play week in, week out at a senior level and, really make a name for himself. And that ambition that he's showing with that move is just really will tie into what Rovers need in terms of the push for the Premier League that they're going to be hoping to make over the second half of this season.
I was listening to a Tottenham podcast a little bit earlier today just to get a little bit more background here, and the feeling there is that he is now too good for under 23 level, and I think his numbers speak for themselves this season. It's 12 goals and 5 assists in 14 Premier League 2 appearances, and for me, the Premier League 2 is a really competitive sort of level for young players to be playing at. Billy, do you think we're going to be able to see McCandy sort of replicate that kind of form in the Championship?
As you say, Premier League 2 is a very competitive division, but at the same time, it's a very different ball game in terms of the physicality of the Championship, the athleticism you need, and the experience that other teams have. I think it will make it not difficult for him to adapt, but I think that will be something that's completely different to his regular setting. So I feel that he will adapt well, but yeah, it will be a change for him. I think the fact that he has got that technical ability, he has got that awareness, the fact that he has been playing against teams in the EFL Trophy as well. He's got that experience of playing against teams within the senior setup. So I believe that he can go on and enjoy a good rest of the season. May have to bide his time a little bit at Blackburn if the sort of the scenario stays the same at Blackburn in terms of the players that they still possess at the moment. But yeah, I think he's got that ambition, as Toby has said. I think that's a massive factor, having someone that's willing to drop down the division to benefit his football career over any sort of monetary rewards or that kind of thing. So I think they've got a really good player who's got his head screwed on and he knows what he wants to do, and that's play regular football.
Absolutely. Coming back to you then, Toby, how do you think Tony Mowbray is going to utilise his new signing then moving forward in the coming weeks and months?
Yeah, that's going to be an exciting one for Rovers fans to keep an eye on, isn't it? I mean, I think, as we've said already, McCandy's come here to play regular first-team football, so I don't think there's any doubt we're going to see him in the lineup at some point sooner rather than later, although it is going to be interesting to see how he gets used and how he's going to force his way into this starting 11 for Blackburn for a couple of reasons. I mean, Mowbray has already made it clear that he's not someone who's going to drop players if they don't deserve to be dropped. And right now, with the form that Rovers are in, there's very few players, if any, in this side who can justify losing their places. So in that sense, he's got to fight on to get into the starting 11 to begin with. And then beyond that, we've sort of seen this season, Mowbray's sort of engineered a bit of a formation change at Ewood Park. So whereas we sort of started the campaign in a 3-4-3 formation, it's now changed to a 3-5-2. So they've effectively lost an attacker here, which obviously means there's one less place open for McCandy to compete for. So that, again, is going to add to the challenge he's got in terms of forcing his way into the lineup to begin with. But I can see that happening sooner rather than later. And I would imagine it'll be a bit of a competition between him and the aforementioned Kadra and also Tyrese Dolan to sort of provide that spark of creativity and attack alongside, perhaps almost more of the more physical presence of a Ben Brereton Diaz, in terms of they physically are two rather different players, say a Brereton Diaz in comparison to one of those other three, in terms of he's more a player who brings the pace and the finishing ability, and then you're looking at someone like a Kadra or now a Markande who's going to be going past the defenders and creating those opportunities either for himself or others. So, you're going to have that really nice blend there. And as we say, you can't really drop Ben Brereton Diaz out of anyone in this side with his 20 goals already this season. So it is going to be a case, I would imagine, of Markande versus Kadra versus Dolan for the place alongside either Brereton and Diaz, or we can't forget Sam Gallagher, who deserves a lot of credit for his performances as well this season. And potentially, who knows, there's talk of another centre forward coming in. So in that sense, it's really exciting times for Rovers in the window in terms of what they might be able to bring in for this promotion push. But yeah, Markande is going to be definitely involved in that first team, and I would imagine creating the chances either for himself or Brereton Diaz to put the ball in the back of the net and potentially keep this promotion push going.
Absolutely an exciting signing for an already exciting season for Blackburn fans. A reminder that we are debating the top 3 best signings across the EFL so far this January. If you are joining us, do get yourselves in the comments. We do want to hear from you. Right, second picks. I'm going to start with yours, Billy. Graham Shin, who has joined Wigan on a 2.5-year deal from Derby County. Shin is, of course, a player with over 450 career appearances, so an absolute wealth of experience that Wigan have added to their squad. Billy, just explain to us a little bit about why Shin is in your top 3.
Yeah, for me, it's surprising to see him drop down to League One. I know Wigan are very ambitious, and should they come up, I think they'll do very well in the Championship. But he's a good Championship player in my eyes. He's someone that has been integral to Derby. I know that sort of the situation at the club is, it makes it more difficult to keep these players that have been performing well this season. But to see him drop down to League One's a big surprise for me. I think that what he brings is a lot. We spoke about him going under the radar, at the start of the season, him being one of the players that, doesn't get the praise that he deserves in that team. It's not just his vision and technical ability and sort of intelligence and reading of the game, but I also think that he's played a big role in helping some of the Derby youngsters come through. I think he's played a big part in Max Bird's development, them two establishing a really good relationship. And the amount of times we hear that Derby do dominate the midfield battle, I think he's key for that. A player that, he can influence the final third. He's composed when receiving the ball with in sort of deep areas as well. So he's a player that can really do everything, and it's quite exciting to see what he can do in League One. And you think of, League One's shaping up to be a very, very competitive end, and it's these fine margins. The adding of a player like Graham Shinnie that could be the difference in between finishing in the playoffs and finishing the automatics. And that in a 2.5 deal, he's a player that could help Wigan readapt to Championship level football as well.
We've had a comment in from Harry, who agrees with you there that the Shinnie signing is excellent and he'd have loved him at Sunderland, which leads me quite nicely into my next question for you, Billy, was whether this signing of Shinnie at Wigan sort of tips, the promotion balance in the Latics' favour heading into the second half of the season.
Yeah, you'd think at this stage, I think Sunderland could still do a lot of good business. There's a lot of scope for Sunderland to tie down Championship level deals, and I'm sure they'll be pushing for that. But at this moment in time, I think that the signing of Shinnie could go a long way to as you say, tipping the balance in their favour. I think what he will bring is, just continued Championship experience. You've got Championship experience running through that Wigan team, and you just look at some of the players coming through as well, in terms of Callum Lang, who perhaps doesn't have that experience, but he's a player that I imagine will be able to adapt to Championship level football, should that be the case next season. So at the moment, the top end of League One's very competitive, full of teams that say we're in the Championship this season. I think would be doing very well. I think that shows a lot of credit to the teams that are in the top end, and say the likes of Oxford, and just showing what they're having to compete with. They're competing with very strong squads, and I think that if Wigan hadn't have secured the Shinnie deal, I still think they've got what it takes to trouble and continue in their pursuit. going for glory in League One this season. But ultimately, yeah, I think this tips it in their favour.
Over to your pick, then your second pick, Toby. Taylor Howard-Bellis, who has joined Stoke on loan from Manchester City for the remainder of the season. This was one deal that did actually stand out to me earlier in the transfer window, where I sort of stepped back and thought that this was really good business. You've seen him play at Blackburn before. What kind of player have Stoke signed here?
Got a really good defender for this level, Stoke, I've got to say. I mean, as you say, I saw him a lot at Blackburn when he was on loan at Ewood Park during the second half of last season. And I just remember every game I saw him, I thought he's playing better this week than he was last week. And that didn't change once. I mean, he just improved. And he was already at a high level to begin with, in fairness to him. So he's more than adept enough to compete at this level. And I think, so, yeah, he's already going to be a really solid Championship signing for Stoke. I think we probably saw that already at the weekend. Really strong debut for him in the win at Hull. And, I mean, that centre-back position was always going to be important for Stoke to strengthen this window. Obviously, they've lost Harry Souttar potentially for the season through injury, and they've had Leo Ostergaard recalled from his loan by Brighton. So they were down on numbers at centre-back, and bringing in Howard-Bellis has gone some way to rectifying that. So obviously it's important in that sense. He's a defender who, I mean, when I was watching him at Blackburn, as I say, he could sort of fit into a number of different roles in that back line. He sort of, Tony Mowbray was always reluctant to sort of use a right-footed defender on the left-hand side of the central defensive roles, as you will. But with Howard-Bellis, by the end of his time there was never that issue. So he'll be able to fit in comfortably, I would imagine, with sort of the systems that Michael O'Neill plays at Stoke with the back three and everything in that sense. And I think as well, you know, it's important in terms of the potential link up that we could see now between say Stoke and Manchester City. You know, if the Premier League's sort of champions look at this deal, see Howard-Bellis thriving there, they might be inclined to, you know, loan Stoke other players in the future, which could be useful for the Potters. Obviously, we've seen them linked with the likes of Liam Delap in the past, and there's no reason why Howard-Bellis can't thrive at Stoke, not just in terms of getting the game time and you know, performing well in the Championship, as we all know we can do. But you know, Stoke with that win at the weekend have sort of put themselves right back into the promotion picture. So that experience of sort of chasing success is something that will come in handy for Howard-Bellis if he is going to make it at Manchester City as well. And then also he's learning off another Stoke centre-back signing in Phil Jagielka, who obviously has absolute loads of Premier League and international experience, and who in himself could have been a good shout for one of our candidates in this debate. So, you know, to be picking up things up from him as well is really going to be useful for Howard-Bellis. So to me, that just looks like a really good signing all round for everyone involved in it.
And of course, sandwiched between his two Championship loans, he's been on loan at Anderlecht as well, hasn't he? And I think he was close to making 20 appearances over there under Vincent Kompany. What kind of development do you think that loan spell is going to have had for him, Toby?
Yeah, that's going to be really helpful for him as well. Obviously, Anderlecht, one of the biggest clubs in Belgium. So, you know, that sort of experience of, again, playing for a club with that sort of pressure and the weight of expectation will have helped him. And doing it under a Manchester City legend in his position in Vincent Kompany, again, that's going to have helped him in terms of he'll have learned a lot from that, you would imagine. So, yeah, that will set him up nicely both for this stint at Stoke and for when he returns to Manchester City in terms of what he's going to know about, you know, the role he's playing and, you know, the pressures of, you know, competing for a top team who are expected to compete for pretty much titles in just about every competition they enter into.
Absolutely. Just a reminder before we move on to Billy and Toby's final picks, if you want to get involved in the comments and let us know your EFL signing of the transfer window so far, do get in touch, as we do want to hear from you. Final picks up now. We'll start with you, Toby, for your final pick. You've got Daryl Dike in there, who's linked back up with Valérien Ismaël, but not Barnsley this time at West Brom. His loan spell last year under Ismaël at Barnsley brought 9 goals, and at West Brom he's signed a 4.5-year deal now. And this is really looking like West Brom's marquee signing for for the month. Toby, why is this deal for DK in your top 3?
In a word, goals. I think we've sort of seen the struggles that West Brom have had in attack this season. I mean, there's no player in the Baggy side who's hit double figures for goals yet this season. And when you compare that to sort of the other teams who are competing for automatic promotion, you've got Mitrovic at Fulham, Solanke at Bournemouth, Brereton Diaz at Blackburn. They're all flying in terms of the goal scoring chart. So you really feel like the absence of a player to produce that sort of return for West Brom is, something that has hindered them quite significantly, certainly in recent weeks in the promotion race. And in DK, they've brought in someone who knows how to do that. He showed that in the Championship with Barnsley last season. He's carried on doing it with Orlando back in the MLS in the interim period between leaving Barnsley and coming back now to the Championship with West Brom. So they should have every confidence that he can get the goals to sort of keep them in that promotion race. And I think as well, the statement of intent that this is from West Brom, the length of the deal, the profile of the signing, the fact that there were whispers of Premier League interest in him, that sort of really shows the intent there. And I think it's going to be interesting in terms of the impact it has on Ismail as well. We've sort of seen him come under maybe a bit of pressure at the Hawthorns. There's been plenty of West Brom fans who've been frustrated with the results and the performances. So, but in bringing in DK, that's really for me a show of faith in him, because it's a signing that Ismail knows that he obviously wanted, having used him before and got the best out of him. So this could be almost a defining moment, you could almost argue, for Ismail at West Brom in terms of if he can get the best out of DK, then he can get the goals to keep the Baggies well in the automatic promotion race, and that's sort of potentially turns things around for him at the club. Whereas if he doesn't, and DK can't do what he did at Barnsley, then the pressure's only going to build on Ismail even more. But I think when you look at the pedigree he's shown, there's no reason not to expect him to get that sort of return that he did for Barnsley, and potentially more in a squad that is arguably going to create more chances for him than he had at Oakwell this season. So that's a really exciting signing for West Brom, and a hugely significant one, you feel, in the promotion race.
Well, there's been a few suggestions from sources that this deal's really pushed West Brom from a financial point of view, and it's going to limit what else Ismail can do this winter. It sounds like there's going to have to be player sales before anybody else can come in. Is that a slight concern with this deal, Turbot?
Maybe to a small extent there is that concern with it, and you can understand that, because they may need reinforcements elsewhere. But as I sort of mentioned, I think it was absolutely essential they got a striker in, and a striker they know can score goals. That was the big question for West Brom this season. I mean, defensively, they've got one of the best records in the league, so that possibly wasn't an area they really needed to recruit. Similarly, it's a solid midfield when everyone's fit. So, that was really the area and the signing that they absolutely had to make. And, maybe other players who come in might arguably be more backup, sort of squad players. So not quite as important in terms of whether or not they do actually get done. And I think the other thing is as well, that we were probably always going to see departures from West Brom anyway this month, or we should be looking at West Brom trying to move players on this month. The likes of Robert Snodgrass, Kenneth Sahore, doesn't really seem like they were going to have much of a future at the Hawthorns really anyway. So, they were always players that were probably going to be in the pipeline for a move away, and that was always going to be something that could have raised funds that can now be spent on bringing in other players if West Brom feel the need to do so. So in that sense, yeah, there's a bit of the risk there, but it also opens up the opportunity to maybe almost kill two birds with one stone in terms of moving on some of those players who might be surplus to requirements, whilst at the same time raising the funds for them extra reinforcements here and there that the Baggies might need.
Absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see how DK does back in the Championship. Over to your selection then, Billy. We've got Steve Cook, who has, of course, joined Nottingham Forest after a long stint on the South Coast with Bournemouth. There's been some impressive performances from Cook already. Do you think we're starting to see his quality, even at this early stage of his Forest career?
Yeah, and I think that was always going to be the case. I'm not too sure if I agree with his lack of game time at Bournemouth, but ultimately I think Scott Parker found his starting centre-back pair of Lloyd Kelly and Gary Cahill, both very good players and deserve to be pushing Cook. But I think Cook is a player that has proven over the years that even at this stage has the Premier League ability. He's in terms of reading the game, in terms of his physicality, in terms of his growing nature of bringing the ball out. I don't think he was the best at that over the years, but I think he's become a trusted player in possession in deep areas. So in that respect, he's become this sort of well-rounded centre-back that fans have loved at Bournemouth over the years. I think he'll be loved by Forest fans, given the effort he shows and those face-saving efforts that he puts in against Fulham. I'm sure that those kind of things will resonate well with the Forest fans and will go down quite well. I think in terms of what Cook will bring, he'll bring a lot in regards to their playoff push. He's a trusted player. He's someone that's going to sort of inspire the rest of the central defence. So far, I think looking at Nottingham Forest, they weren't desperately in need of a centre-back. I think the way that they've been defensively this season has been solid, but I feel that he is an improvement of what they've currently got, and for that reason I'm excited to see what they can do for the remainder of the season. We've spoken about Steve Cooper before, and he tends to go for players that are younger and he develops them very well, but to go for a player like Cook with the experience, I think will help the younger players within the squad. And I think all in all, he's a very, very good addition at a club that will be looking at the playoffs as a minimum this season, a very ambitious club, with Cook obviously sharing those ambitions too. I think there was a bit of Premier League interest too, but I feel that Forest is the right club in terms of regular football and a project there for him to continue on.
We've had a comment in from the EFL lover, Steve Cook. Signing for Nottingham Forest is the best for me. What a player. We've had that comment in. He's obviously in your top three as well, Billy. But I wonder whether this deal might just go a little bit under the radar, across a month where we're going to see so much business. Kind of agree with that?
I feel that within the context of the Championship and other Championship fans, yes, I think it could go under the radar. Obviously, all these clubs engaging in excellent deals. You think of Middlesbrough already bringing in Balogun, and as we were speaking about Blackburn bringing in McCandy. So in that respect, I think sometimes naturally defenders do go under the radar, but I'm sure within the Nottingham Forest fans they'll see the difference and they'll experience the difference, because as we say, Cook is a very good player at this level who could have a massive part in what remains of this season.
Absolutely. He's probably a cult hero in waiting there, isn't he? A couple of those face-saving tackles and they'll be loving him at the City Ground. All right, that concludes this afternoon's debate show. We've been looking at the best three signings from across the EFL so far this January. Thanks to Billy and Toby for joining me, and thanks to everybody that's got themselves in the comments. We haven't had a chance to read them all out, but we do appreciate you getting in touch, and they don't go unnoticed. Make sure you're tuning in to Football League World TV tomorrow. There's plenty of fan debate shows where we're going to be looking at the January transfer window, and then I think we've got an EFL transfer zone show coming up later in the afternoon. So plenty to tune into. So we'll see you again soon.